Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. And before we get started this week, I want to make sure that you got my email about the updated schedule. And as I explained in the email, as I was looking at the schedule going in the next couple of weeks, I just thought I'm not ready to move to the midterm just yet. And then as I started looking at the material for Chaucer, I realized that he's just simply too important, the work's too important to condense into just 1 week, especially trying to read the prologue and the Knight's Tale, which is just it's just too much in one space. So I made some changes, kicked the midterm back a week, and it'll change a little bit of what we read in the Renaissance, but that's okay because I'd rather get more in depth with the text that we do have than spend a bunch of time trying to make sure we check every box. So if you have questions about that, feel free to let me know. Though it would be the first time that I ever had anyone complain about or wonder about moving a midterm back or decreasing the amount of text that you would have to read in a semester. So yeah, I built this semester out earlier and made a bunch of changes to it. And yeah, sometimes it happens where you plan and you just get a little too aggressive in your planning. So, oh well. Anyway, enough about that. I wanted to talk with you a little bit about what you're going to be doing this week and to walk with you through a little bit of Chaucer and the discussion that we're going to be doing this week. So let's walk through the materials and then you'll see you'll be able to see everything, and I'll explain some things as I go. First off, I want to recommend again to you this podcast, The Rest is History. And by fortuitous circumstances, this week's that they just posted is on Chaucer and the Canterbury Tales. And I listened to it this morning, and it's just excellent. These two historians go in, and they're historians, so their focus is the history. And you get a really good connection to Chaucer's background and how he rose to prominence in the literary world and in the social world, more than we can cover just in a week of unpacking him. In fact, in most schools that have a medievalist and staff or someone who focuses in this era, they'll do whole semesters on Chaucer and his work. He's rightly called one of the forefathers of the English language, and he and Shakespeare perhaps are the two most influential people in English literature. And I don't think Shakespeare would be near as brilliant as he is unless he had Chaucer, unless a lot of these authors had Chaucer setting the way in a lot of directions. So I want to recommend that podcast to you. It really gives you a lot of the excellent history of the text, history of Chaucer, and it talks a little bit about what the text is doing in terms of breaking down a lot of the social boundaries that were in existence during this time. So recommend that to you again. And then the week 6 checklist is what you're walking through here. It's just there for your reference. And then here's the week 6 video, which you already know is here. I wanted to link you guys to this copy of the Ellesmere manuscript that's been digitized, and it's in the Huntington Library. And I wanted to show it to you because I wanted you to get a sense of what the text actually looks like as it's making its way around the world. And so this is from between 1400 and 1410, and this is what's fairly incredible is this is long before, I guess not that long, printing press is going to happen within a couple of generations, but this was all hand written, and you can see some of the creative work in the margins and in the drawing that you have here. So you have what appears to be a dragon roaming around, and it's just amazing. And so you can click through this. I did the front page here, but you really can click through so many places and see. Let's see if we've got, where they break things, like you can see here in the notes where we're switching to the squire. Let's go back there. Yes, so you have the squire there where all the characters are listed. Here's the knight, and it's just a fascinating look at a text in its own right, long before the printing press and the process that we see it. As you dig into the text this week, the text that you have is in Middle English. both for this one and for next week. Now, I know that it might be a little difficult to read Middle English. I get that. I don't begrudge you the difficulties of it, but what I want to recommend to you is just to read it out loud and just walk through the sounds as you see them, and in most cases you are actually going to get there. So I want to bring up there in the reading notes a little bit of how you can hear the language start to come out, so it's not that intimidating. And that's another reason why I wanted to break it into sections, is so that you would have a little more time to read this text. But I wanted to read, and by no means am I am I a medievalist that am really good at pronunciation. In fact, when I took at AUM, I took a Middle English course, and I had to translate a text, and at the end they asked me to read it out loud, and I looked at my professor and said, "How did I do?" And he said, in the most gentle way possible, "Not very well." And so in terms of pronunciation, but I want to read this as though I'm just going to read it out loud, and I think what you can hear is the actual language coming out, even if the spelling doesn't match. So in this section about the knight, you'll see, he loved chivalry, troth and honor, freedom and courtesy. Right, so you can see that it's not that different from the English that we have here, and that you can say he loved chivalry, troth, and it's very close to the word truth, and so you can clearly see the connection there. So it's not that difficult to read, but it does take some getting used to the rhythm, as we've done with previous texts, to engage, read out loud. The text is the edition we have in the Norton Anthology is really good. It gives you a lot of like glosses, which is the on the side it'll give you definitions of the words, and then in the bottom it'll give you notes that you can use to understand some of the references that he's making there. So as we continue to read about the knight, full worthy was he in his lord's wear, which would be war, and thereto had he ridden no man far or further, as well in Christendom as in heathenness, or the countries that are not a part of the Christian kingdom. He's talking about the Crusades and the Knight's passages across Europe, and ever wondered for his worthiness. So I'm going to read it again so that you guys can hear it, and I think maybe if you read it out loud, you can understand what it's trying to say. He loved chivalry, truth and honor, freedom and courtesy. Full worthy was he in his Lord's war, and thereto had he ridden no man far, as well in Christendom as in heathenness, and ever honored for his worthiness. So in the language of poetry, and you bring in the rhythm of the lines and the rhyming of those last words, it makes it a lot easier to read. So I give you that as an encouragement to not be intimidated by the text. It's really, really insightful and thought and smart, and it's broken up into short sections about the individual characters. Now next week we're going to read a digital edition of The Knight's Tale that has a line-by-line translation, and that will make things a little easier, which I'm a little more comfortable with in this setting, because you're having to follow a narrative versus these short little chunks that you can break up. So as you dig in to this work, you've understood and you've looked at some of the history of Chaucer, and sorry, I closed those out. And that I've given you a quick summary information about Chaucer and about the Canterbury Tales themselves. One thing to pay a special attention to is that the world is changing massively during this time. And as the guys on the podcast talk about, and something I mentioned last week, what you have is you've got a lot of money exchanging hands, the rise of the mercantile exchange. You've got a lot of money needed by the crown because of the wars that they're being fought in France. You've got the Black Death, which removes so much of the population, that you have this rising of people that are not from noble families, but have a lot of wealth and influence. And Chaucer mirrors that rise to where he goes into an influential position in court, and as a part of that travels to Europe and is introduced to the Italian literature that's around the time, and you can read about that in the introduction in the anthology. And it's just this fascinating world of so much going on, and Chaucer just gives us this beautiful picture of these changes. And perhaps the craziest thing, or as things are moving around, one of the most important changes is that the people are no longer just simply stuck in the position that they're in. And you'll hear me mention here, and then you'll also see it in the notes about the idea of the three estates, which are those who fight, which would be the nobility, and like the knights and all of that group, and the wealth that's associated with that. Those who pray, which are the church leaders, and then everybody else, the laborers or those who work. And what you're going to start to see is that third class rising to the same level of prominence and of influence as the first two classes. And what Chaucer does beautifully in this text is he unpacks this idea that no one is defined necessarily by their class. And anything that we have as an indicator of who somebody's supposed to be because of who they are, how they were born, or what sort of station they were born in is not necessarily determinant of them. And in the Canterbury Tales and in the general prologue in particular, we're never given a picture of this is the only way to view somebody. That there's no such thing in this tale of a person who also has all of the wealth and all of the resources and also is completely unassailable. Even in the best references, like perhaps as the knight, as one of the more noble characters in this tale, there's been interpretations of questions that he may not be as nice as he's praised to be, especially when you consider that the number of wars he's been in. There's at least one reading that says he's not a loyal knight, he's a mercenary, and what he is good at doing is fighting, and that's his honor. And so a lot of that conversation about nobility and loyalty is a little bit ironic. So all that to say, as you dig into these individual characters, look for those ways where you can read it straight and you can say, this is the description, and then often look at those places where you can leave it a little bit slanted, right? And what that means is the idea of always looking not just directly, but around what's right in front of you to ask questions about it. So what does it mean for somebody like the monk to not really be interested in reading as much as he is interested in hunting? And so is that a good thing or a bad thing? Chaucer may or may not let us know. There are certain characters where he is pretty direct, and generally those characters have to do with religious leadership. So at least if nothing else, Chaucer is very aware of hypocrisy, especially in the church, and he goes after it pretty significantly here. So if you haven't seen it, there's a movie called The Knight's Tale, or A Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger, and it's sort of a modern anachronistic look at the past, but it really is fun and incorporated. And the character there is played by Paul Bettany, who you probably will know as Vision from the Marvel movies. He plays Geoffrey Chaucer, and he plays him pretty hysterically, and I really enjoy that depiction. Even though it may not be truly historically accurate, it is rather funny, and you might enjoy that. So I make that recommendation to you, and as you're working through this information, what I've done is given you notes on each of the characters, and I want you to think about where the characters are in their stations, what might be expected of them as Chaucer describes them, and then how they act in that environment. What you're going to do this week in your assignment is pick two of these characters, and you're going to unpack for us how these two characters compare. So one easy way to approach this would be if you're going to pick two characters from the class that fights, which you really have to, it's the knight and the squire. What does the text say and how are they different, right? Or if you want to pick across different estates, how is someone like the knight similar to somebody like the parson, right? If those are two noble characters, how does the text describe them as noble, even though they come from two very different estates? And even within those who pray estate, the parson is represented as one of the more impoverished people in that. So you've got a lot of room in this assignment to go play around with some of the major ideas. I want you to keep in mind the four things we've been continuing to talk about this semester. Those four terms of honor, loyalty, virtue, and the fourth one is escaping me right now. I'm sorry. Honor, loyalty, virtue, Chivalry. Thank you. With this, you would think that would be the most obvious one that we could have here, because we're still in the realm of knights, but it's also now a little later on Friday afternoon. I guess my brain is not firing at 100%. I wonder what Chaucer would say about me in his description of me, that he could not remember the word of chivalry, even though he talked about the knight having chivalry not 5 minutes ago. So, yeah, keep those terms in mind. What are the expectations of these various positions, right? If you're going to talk about those who fight, chivalry is an important term for you. But everyone is expected to operate in some measure of a term of honor. Or what do you think about the term of values for someone who is operating, or a virtue, in terms of the people that are operating as those who pray? You will find that the church characters that we might expect to be some of the more morally virtuous people are some of the worst, without exception. Take a look at the friar, the pardoner, and the summoner, and you will find that they are not depicted with a lot of sympathy. So enjoy this week, enjoy this text. I know that at first glance it's a little bit difficult, but give it a break, give it time, read it out loud, hear the rhyme and the language of the text, and then you'll be good to go. In terms of, and I'm going to put this in so you'll see it on Blackboard, it's not up there now. I'm going to move the seal method PowerPoint into every week so that you have it there ready to see, because in your assignment, I want to see you incorporating examples from the text in quotes, and then explaining how those quotes illustrate your point. And so one way that you could form this assignment is to say, here's the big topic that I'm talking about. Here's its reflection in one character. There's a quote. Here's how the quote reflects this topic in this character. In contrast, here is this other character and how he is or she is different. And then quote, and then here's how the quote shows this differences. You see how I'm basically laid that out as a combined seal method. It's kind of SIEIE, but I think that will be the best way to approach something like this. You can't summarize and paraphrase a text, especially not a poetic text. It just doesn't work. It stays kind of up here when I want to see you down in with the text, engaging with it and working through its ideas. So feel free to reach out to me with any questions or concerns as you're reading this. I hope you take a listen to that podcast. There's so much available on Chaucer online. It's a really, for good reason, because he is one of the godfathers of the English language. Now, I don't mind if you end up finding a translation to use for this text to answer these questions or to complete the assignment. I do want you to use the actual Middle English from the literature to explain in your writing assignment. So in a lot of ways, going and finding a translation might cause you to have to work a little bit harder rather than just spending a little time getting into the rhythm of Chaucer's language. But I will leave that up to you. But I do want to see that Middle English, or that the actual Middle English in your writing. So if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to send me an email, reach out in any way that I can help you. Thanks.